don't know whether this would be surprising or not, but I come from a long line of Stoics. I grew up in Indiana. My ancestors, when I think of my ancestors, really, I pretty much only think about a couple of generations back. My grandparents on my mother's side, that circle of great aunts and uncles with names like Etna and Bertha and Flossie and Morris, and I see them standing, at any number of family reunions in a small circle, the men with their deeply tanned faces and their very pale foreheads, those farmer tans. They weren't people without a sense of humor, but they were pretty quiet folk, and that's where I come from, really. And so to be talking about joy, maybe we should be looking for someone more emotive than I am. Now, joy, it's an interesting thing because joy is an internal experience, all right? So if we're having an experience of joy, that is something we can really only name for ourselves. I can't say, oh, I can tell you're having joy. Really, it's an internal experience. So if that's true, then we can't know exactly whether my experience of joy is the same as your experience of joy. Now, being a line of Stoics and being a Hoosier, growing up in Indiana, I often describe my emotional life as being kind of like this. Some people, not naming any names, it's more like this. So actually, if you want to see my emotional life, you really have to kind of take a longer timeline and spread it all closer together, because otherwise it doesn't show very much. So my experience of joy might actually not be as obvious as some people. I might just be quietly having my own joy on the inside, not really letting you in on the experience. But that's not always true. Sometimes I can be a little effusive, or, like when I'm in situations like this, where I act out a little bit more than actually I usually do in my normal life. But still, we can only kind of presume what joy is like in different people. And I sort of believe that after a while, what we do, this is what I think happens, over a while, we kind of match up our internal experience with the labels that have been given to those experiences in the culture. I call these presumed common understandings. So when we use the word joy, it's not a word that we don't necessarily assume that we can't kind of understand what joy is, but there is a presumption around that it is kind of one thing, and actually, I think it's much more complex than that. I'm pretty convinced that our experiences are all woven in together, so it's not like you can take joy, especially with joy. You wouldn't want to put it in that kind of box. It needs to dance around a bunch of other experiences. And I don't know if you've had this experience, but it sort of sounds like you might have had this at this memorial service yesterday, where there might have been a sense of loss, but also a sense of celebration. Really, have any of you had that experience? Like at funerals, it's kind of funny at funerals where you can have this right alongside the grief is a sense of appreciation and joy and even celebration. So if we take any of these experiences that we give names to, like joy, I think we have to assume that they're all woven in around a bunch of other experiences that are happening at the same time. And not only just kind of emotional experience, but we're having thoughts and maybe spiritual experience, and even physicality, a kind of physicality. As an artist, I'm often mixing colors. So I might have a color that I would name, and we would all name red. But it turns out in order to get this particular red, I have to mix in a little bit of blue, and maybe a tiny bit of yellow, and maybe some black or white or some other color. So even though we might all agree that it's red, it's actually a mixture of a lot of different things. And I believe that joy is one of those things. So, as I look at my own life and my own experience, I'm not often sure whether what I might label as joy is something that you might label as joy as well. This is kind of weird, but I'm going to tell you anyway. In the morning, when I make the bed, when it's my turn to make the bed, I often, have the sense of, I'm really happy to have this bed here. I look forward to going to bed at night. I look forward to getting up out of it in the morning. And it's kind of this weird thing of, like, I'm just really kind of grateful and a sense of whatever about the rhythm of going to sleep and waking up, looking forward to kind of just passing out, where that weird thing of just losing consciousness for a while and then coming back in and the light's going to come up. For me, that's a kind of joy. And then there are all sorts of other experiences that are more like, and those are experiences of joy too. And then there's kind of the profound joy. Like I imagine Mary. What an experience. This young woman, she's pregnant, which would not be a good thing in her situation at that time. And yet when she discovers that this is a God plan, she rejoices. And I don't know whether Mary kind of picked up her robes and did a little bit of tap dancing, or whether she just took a deep breath and let that kind of Mona Lisa smile hold on her face. I don't know. And I don't care. But I'm just so glad that she experienced that. One of the things about joy, I think, is that it can seem to be without a kind of purpose. That it's something that we just get to enjoy. I don't know if any of you have seen, there's a video clip that's come across my feed every now and again. And it's a little clip of a deer in a relatively small puddle of water. Have any of you seen this? And the deer walks into the water and starts to kick up his heels. Or her heels. I'm not sure which one it is exactly. It looks kind of young. But here she goes into the puddle and dances around for a while, flipping up the water, and then kind of bounds out, and then she bounds back in and bounds out and into the water. And you think, why is this deer doing that? But it becomes clear that that deer is really just enjoying himself or herself. How strange. That we can just find these things that, boom, they just create that sense of delight or that sense of joy. And I think we need to be watching for joy. We need to be paying attention to see when it crosses our path. I think there are ways that we might be able to create it for ourselves. We can put ourselves in situations that we know create joy for us, but other times joy just comes, it just drives right by. And I think we want to be able to see it when it happens, to take it in, to enjoy it, because I'm pretty sure that the experience of joy in our bodies is a really good thing for our health. I'm convinced of that. That in the same way that stress breaks down the body, experiences like joy build it up. In the scripture, it's kind of interesting in the first one, there's all this stuff about the way that nature reacts, and in the Bible, often nature is, clapping its hands. The trees are clapping their hands, and the crocuses are rejoicing, and, it's almost like they have this incredible life of their own in a way that we might not even notice. Maybe a tree claps its hands over the course of 100 years. We wouldn't even be able to see it, and yet, we can look at the tree, we can look at the landscape, and we can see the wonder of that. So I want to invite you to claim your own joy, to understand what creates that for you, to understand how you might give it to others, to notice it when it crosses your path so that you can have its fullness. Even if it doesn't seem to be the kind of joy that other people describe or that other people expect. And I invite you to, even though you can be open to joy, you're not obligated. Because sometimes, people want us to be joyful at times when we're just not ready to be joyful. So we need to have the freedom to be something else, to have something else right in our experience. I understand that you're paying some attention to the hymn Joy to the World. We're celebrating the 300th anniversary of Joy to the World. And oftentimes in church services, this is it's kind of the triumphant ending of a service, and a lot of the services, lots of times you have brass and maybe even some timpani, and it's really big. Joy to the world, the Lord. Just sing it with me, ready? And we're going to sing it like this is going to be the triumphant, celebratory joy to the world. Here we go. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room. And heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing. It's good. That's a great way to do Joy to the World. But I sort of think joy might also have a little bit more of kind of a sparkling energy. So rather than, it might be more like, I mean, you think of heaven and nature sing, that's like a sleigh ride. Heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and I always want hymns to go faster than they should. But we're just gonna try it. We're gonna sing it more like we are on one of those rides. Here we go. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room. And heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing. So that's a different kind of joy, isn't it? But you can hardly sing it like that and not kind of think, wow, that was fun. Let's go on the sleigh ride again. But there might be another way to sing that song. It might be slower and deeper, more like that profound sense of kind of the acknowledgement of the wonder of life, of God's presence in our life. So it might be more like, joy to the world, sing it with me. The Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room. And heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing. Amen.